All right, welcome everybody. So we're going to continue with our Mishnah Torah series tomorrow. So instead, I wanted to talk about something else, a topic that I know many of you love. Why anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. I repeat, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. And I actually think it's a ridiculous claim because there's many Jews that are not Zionists, and to accuse them of being anti-Semites is just absurd. So I wanted to talk about that. So anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Judaism is a faith. It is a religion and a people that has existed for thousands of years before the state of Israel. Israel is a modern political state. So to say that they're the same thing is dangerous. It makes Jews everywhere responsible for the actions of a government that they may not support. And that fuels anti-Semitism rather than fighting it. And this is a problem that the modern state of Israel has created. They are 100% to blame, not even like mostly to blame. They're 100% to blame for this because they go out there and they publicly claim to speak for Jews all over the world, even Jews that want nothing to do with them. And there's a famous statement that Israel is to the Jews what France is to the French and what Japan is to the Japanese, which is completely false. Um, because we became a nation at Mount Sinai when we accepted the Torah. We weren't even in the land when we became the nation of Israel. And even the modern day Zionists today, the secular people that founded the state of Israel, considered other places like Uganda, Argentina, which goes to show even the Zionists who started the state of Israel didn't connect Zionism to that geographic location. They ended up picking that location for sure. But if you follow the logic, what is Japan to the Japanese or France to the French, then that should be what Israel is to the Israelis, not what Israel is to the Jews who are living in Australia. So they're trying to conflate the two, and they are the ones making the claim that they speak for Jews all over the world. They don't even speak for all the Jews in Israel. You know, there was people in the land of Israel, Naturi Karta, for example, they predate the state of Israel. They voted against Zionism. So the state of Israel doesn't even speak for all the Jews living within the land of Israel. They for sure do not speak for Jews outside of the land. But because they claim that they speak for all Jews, people who don't know any better see Jews living outside of the land and say, well, don't you automatically support what Israel's doing by default? Isn't that your nation? No. If you're not an Israeli, you are a citizen of whatever country that you're living in. Okay, so I want to explain why anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Let's look at Judaism versus Zionism. Judaism is a religion. It is a covenantal way of life, a people stretching back to Mount Sinai. Zionism, by contrast, is a modern political ideology. It's about 150 years old that sought to establish a Jewish nation state. Equating the two erases the diversity of Jewish thought and identity, and it rewrites our history. So the reason I got the idea to make this video is I heard about this Israeli flag problem. Um, I heard a statement that it's now illegal to burn an Israeli flag. And the person that made the video explaining this, understandably, was very upset because as an American, he's just as offended as I am that you can burn an American flag. I think this is a disgraceful act that there's an argument for should it be illegal? Should we be allowed to convict people that are burning American flags in America? However, my understanding is that it is allowed because it's a form of political protest. So now when he makes the claim, which I want to state is false, I had to look it up. Is it illegal to burn an Israeli flag? And from what I found, it's not illegal to burn an Israeli flag for the same reason it's not illegal to burn an American flag. It's considered a form of protest. So where does this come from? I guess there was a case recently where some judge ruled that whoever this person was that burned an Israeli flag is guilty of anti-Semitism, which is a hate crime, and it gets an enhancements now. It's an even bigger crime. So how does this work? And what I found was that yes, it's technically legal. It's allowed by law to burn an Israeli flag because that is a form of protest. But because they have the Magen David on it, the Star of David, that represents Jewish people. So that can be potentially viewed as, oh, well, you hate Jews. You're burning a flag that has a Jewish symbol on it. So therefore, you're not protesting the government. You're saying that you hate Jews. So that's a legal interpretation, which automatically my mind goes to, well, wait a minute. So then you're saying if I criticize the Israeli government, which should be allowed, but there's Jews in the Israeli government, so that means now I'm an anti-Semite. I don't like some of the things Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, the prime minister of Israel. So I should be allowed to criticize the prime minister of Israel. Oh, but he's Jewish. So that can be viewed as anti-Semitism because you're criticizing a Jew. So this conflation to me is very dangerous. And so you can understand how Americans who are upset at watching people burn the American flag without penalties are now watching people get thrown in jail for hate crimes. It's not even that, well, it's not that you committed a crime, it's just that you don't like these people, allegedly. We're attributing a hateful motive to you. So now that's a hate crime. And essentially, that makes it illegal to burn an Israeli flag if the legal interpretation is going to be that that's anti Semitism, which basically means you're not allowed to criticize that government. So it's an understandable why people are having the impression that it's illegal, and that's why we have to separate the difference between Judaism and Zionism. You can't conflate the two. So the Israeli flag, using the Star of David, which is today a Jewish religious symbol in some circles, if you go to a Satmar community, you're not going to find a Magen David. You're not going to find an Israeli flag anywhere in the neighborhood. However, this is the most religious group you can find. They are ultra Orthodox. They are ultra religious Jews, and they are not using that symbol. So it's just wrong to conflate the two. But courts have recently suggested that attacking the Israeli flag could be anti-Jewish because of this symbol. But this blurs the line between a political protest against Israel's government and a racial attack against Jews. I don't view it as a racial attack. I mean, Judaism is a religion, it's not a race. So it's dangerous to conflate these two. When people are told that Israel, the secular state, the modern state, of people that are not only they're lacking religiosity, they're sometimes hostile towards the Jewish religion. When they are told that that secular country represents all Jews, two things happen. Number one, Israel makes the false claim that they speak for Jews everywhere, even those who disagree. And two, anti Semites blame all Jews for Israel's actions. Both outcomes are harmful to Jews. Why should I be blamed for anything that the secular state of Israel does? I am not a citizen of Israel. I do not vote in their elections. I have zero representation. So why should I be blamed for anything that they do? I have nothing to do with the secular state of Israel. So anti-Semites should not believe the lie that they represent me and that I by default am behind and support everything that they do. 100% am not. The real harm is that if someone protests Israeli policies, that does not mean that they hate Jews. When courts or politicians insist otherwise, they create a world where every act of protest against Israel is labeled anti Semitic. This trivializes genuine anti Semitism, which is hatred of Jews because they are Jews, not because of political disagreement with Israel. This is another lie that always gets told, um, that certain groups, they just hate Jews, when these groups have no problem with Jews. They have a problem with Zionism. Turi Karta, for example, protests with some of these people. They're not attacked, they're not spit on because they're not Zionists. If these people hated Jews, they wouldn't allow Jews into their protest. It just goes to show there's a difference between the Jewish religion at people who are following the Jewish religion and people who are supporting Zionism. They're not the same. The Jewish voice in the diaspora. Jews have lived faithfully in the diaspora for centuries without a secular state. Our loyalty to God is to God's covenant and to the Torah, not to any government. Saying that Jews must identify with Israel makes us vulnerable to collective blame, the very same thing that anti Semitism has done for generations. Think about that. Anti Semites say that, that Jews are to blame for this and that. So if these Jews over here are doing something bad, you, as a Jew, are guilty by association. This is what anti Semites have done. They look at certain Jews being represented in certain areas, say, well, this is what Jews do. But yet, this is the claim that Israel's making. If you are a Jew, you are automatically supposed to be a citizen of Israel by default. You have the right to return. Even converts, people who convert to Judaism, now you have a right to the land because Israel says they represent you. And it's just simply false. And because of that, a lot of what they are doing angers people all over the world. People don't like what they're seeing, and now they're taking that out on Jews. So if you look at when Jews are being attacked elsewhere outside of the land, oftentimes we're being blamed for what the state of Israel is doing. So that's increasing anti-Semitism rather than them just saying, hey, this is what we're doing over here. If you don't like it, your problem is with us, whatever. But they're trying to make us guilty by association. And Israel is the one doing that, claiming that we are part of it when many of us are not. So if you equate Judaism with Israel, you are endangering Jews. If you separate Judaism from Israel, you are protecting Jews and preserving the integrity of our faith. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and confusing the two makes real anti-Semitism worse. So, to summarize, there's a difference between Judaism and Zionism. Judaism is a religion, covenant, and a people that has existed for thousands of years. Zionism is a modern political ideology. It's about 150 years old. They created a secular state of Israel. They're not the same thing. When people claim that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitism, they erase that distinction. And that's dangerous because it makes Jews everywhere responsible for the actions of a government they may or may not support. The real life example is recently courts in the US have suggested that burning the Israeli flag could be considered anti-Semitism because it has a Star of David on it. But think about what that means. If someone is protesting Israel's policies, including Jews, religious Jews who protest their policies, suddenly that gets redefined as hatred of Jews. You get labeled as self-hating Jews, which naturally means if you're a Jew, by default, you're supposed to support whatever Israel's doing, otherwise you're a self-hating Jew. That's not protecting Jews, that's putting us at risk. If Israel claims to speak for all Jews, then when Israel does something controversial, anti-Semites will blame all Jews. And we see that happening all over the country. That's how conflating Israel with Judaism fuels anti-Semitism instead of fighting it. We need to be clear, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Criticizing a government is not the same as hating a people. Judaism is a much bigger, much older, much holier, and much holier than any modern state. Confusing the two doesn't protect Jews, it endangers us. If you want to fight anti-Semitism, keep Judaism and Israel separate. That protects Jews and keeps our faith honest. And something I just heard yesterday, they did a sting operation, I guess in Nevada, trying to find adults that are trying to find children to have sex with, otherwise known as raping children. They arrested 8 people. One of them happens to be an Israeli. He happens to work in the Israeli government underneath Benjamin Netanyahu in some type of cyber division. So he was arrested. All 8 people were arrested, including the Israeli that works for the Israeli government. And so he was allowed to fly back to Israel. He was released from jail. I guess he was bailed out and allowed to fly back to Israel. Now, if you didn't know, Israel has some policy where they do not extradite people, specifically people wanted for sex crimes against children. People who have active warrants for their arrest in America are located in Israel, and Israel will not extradite them, will not send them back to America to face the charges. So, by definition, this guy who is, I guess innocent until proven guilty in America, but he's been charged with the intent of wanting to rape children. By definition, he's the definition of a flight risk. We have every reason to assume if he makes bail that he will return to Israel, who would not extradite him back to America to face the court date. This whole thing about Diddy being arrested, he didn't get bail because he was a flight risk. It's logical to assume that this Israeli would also flee and go back to Israel and not return for his court date. So he was allowed to leave. It's just mind-boggling that he was allowed to go back to Israel. It's reported in, I think it was the Jerusalem Post, one of these Israeli newspapers. They worded it differently. They said, well, he was detained and questioned, which makes it sound like, well, was he actually arrested? My understanding is yes, he was arrested. He was charged with this heinous crime and allowed to go back to Israel. So on the Patrick Bet David podcast, Adam, I forget his last name, but he's Jewish. He starts, trying to conflate it. Oh, well, 8 people were arrested. Why are we talking about the Israeli? It's because he's Jewish. It's because he's an Israeli. You're targeting him, trying to, once again, mix being Jewish with being Israeli. If you are a religious Jew, I don't think you're doing what this guy was accused of doing. Why were we talking about that guy? Why was that guy the headline? Because that's the only guy that was allowed to leave the country and go back to Israel. The other 7 people that were arrested are not allowed to leave the country. This guy was obviously high up in government. It was an FBI investigation. So it really makes you wonder, did the American government say, okay, this guy, he's sort of a diplomat, let's let him go? So I think Americans are correct to question, okay, why does Israel have this policy? It's our greatest ally, right? We're doing a lot of things for them with money, weapons, vetoing United Nations resolutions that the world is against. We're supporting them in a war. Why are they not sending back people that we have active warrants for their arrest? Did we, as an American government, just get involved in one of these operations and say, hey, listen, let this guy go? It's a reasonable request to say, hey, listen, we're doing a lot for this country. If you came over here and are trying to harm our children, we want to make sure that you're coming back to face these charges for these crimes. Now, maybe that will happen. Maybe this guy will be brought back and will have to go to court. Maybe he will. This just happened yesterday. I don't know. But I do know for a fact that there is a history with Israel of not sending back people who are wanted for these types of crimes. So I think when we're constantly told that we have to support that country, I think it's reasonable when you see cases like this to say, hey, why is it that they're getting special treatment? At least in this case, what it sounds like. And if you have a problem with that, which every American should have a problem with, they should be angered by, then I think we need to make a distinction. That is something that happened with a member of the Israeli government, which should not be attributed to religious Jews, because most religious Jews are not doing things like this. As religious Jews, we should not be expected to defend these types of behaviors. And so you cannot conflate that secular government with religious Jews. And this is what happens when people start saying, oh, the Talmud this is what Jews believe. No, we do not support that. We are obligated to call out things like that and be against it. We are correct to protest when we see injustices like that happening in the name of Judaism. That has nothing to do with Torah following Jews. So that's my opinion on it, and that's why I think it's dangerous to conflate Judaism with Zionism, and it is not anti-Semitism to criticize a secular foreign government, which is what Israel is. It's a foreign country and it's a foreign government, and it should not be free from criticism. And you are not an anti-Zionist, an anti-Semite, or a self-hating Jew if you criticize a secular government.